this session, we're going to talk about the International Environmental Agreements, or also known as environmental protocols. These are treaties or agreements made by the organizations around the world with a purpose to preserve the environment's richness and manage humans' interference with nature. Here are those protocols: the Basel Conventions, the Rotterdam Convention, the Stockholm Conventions, the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change, or also known as UNFCCC, the Kyoto and Montreal Protocol, and lastly, the Agenda 21. First is the Basel Convention. This mainly focuses on the hazardous waste such as hospital waste and chemical waste. This convention mitigates on how this waste will be handled or disposed in a manner that it won't affect the environment. In 1970s, there is an increase in public resistance to the disposal of hazardous waste and the escalation of the disposal cost. But on March 22, 1989, the treaty was adopted and entered force on May 5, 1992. These are the countries who are shaded in blue who participated in the convention with a total number of 187 countries. The objective of this convention is to protect human health against the adverse effects of the hazardous water. They also aim to restrict the transboundary movement of waste, to reduce this waste and promote environmentally sound management of hazardous waste, and lastly, to establish a regulatory system. Here are the following materials that are hazardous: the medical waste, the wood-preserving chemicals, waste from inks and dyes, and residues from industrial waste disposal. This applies to exporting and importing countries or of any of the countries of transit. The Protocol on Liability and Compensation was adopted on December 10, 1999, and has the objective to provide a comprehensive regime for liability, the adequate and prompt compensation for damage resulting from a transboundary movement of hazardous waste and other waste, and it will be addressed unto someone who is financially responsible in the event of the incident. The Ban Amendment was amended in 1995, with the parties agreed on the listed parties on Annex 7 or the members of OECD, EU, Liechtenstein. Prohibit immediately all transboundary movements of hazardous waste which are destined for final disposal operations from OECD to non-OECD states. The second agreement is the Rotterdam Convention. It deals with the prior informed consent procedure for certain hazardous chemicals and pesticides in the international trade. There is a sudden increase in chemical production and trade. With this, the potential risk by these hazardous chemicals also increases. But on 1989, the prior informed consent or the PIC procedure has been introduced, adopted in September 10, 1998, and finally took action in February 24, 2004. These are the countries who are shaded in blue who participated in the convention with a total number of 162 countries, with 72 signatories. The objective of Rotterdam Convention is to promote shared responsibilities and cooperative efforts among each parties in the international trade of certain hazardous products in order to protect human health and the environment from the potential harm and to contribute environmentally sound use. There are two key provisions: the informed consent procedure and the information exchange. The voluntary PIC procedure is designed to help participating countries learn more about the characteristics of potentially hazardous chemicals that may be imported. They are also designed to initiate a decision-making process on the future import of these chemicals, and lastly, to facilitate the dissemination of these decisions to other countries. The following are the hazardous materials and its protocols in this convention. First, the chemicals are banned and severely restricted to protect the human health or the environment. And lastly, severely hazardous pesticides formulation or SHPF are causing problems under conditions of use in developing countries or in countries with economies in transition. The players of this convention are the parties in the designated national authorities or DNA, Conference of the Parties or COP, the Chemical Review Committee or CRC, and lastly the Secretariat. The benefits to each party is that it could prevent unwanted trade. There will be an early warning system, export notification, and network of DNAs. It will be also good for informed decision making, information accompanying export, and technical assistance. The next convention is the Stockholm Convention, which focuses on persistent organic pollutants. In 1995, the awareness on persistent organic pollutants or the POPs pose a major and increasing threats to human health and environment. To prevent this, the Stockholm Convention was adopted on March 22, 2001, and it took action on May 17, 2004. These are the countries who are shaded in blue who participated in the convention, with a total number of 184 countries with the 152 signs. The Stockholm Convention aims to protect human health and the environment by banning the production of some of the most toxic chemicals. The provisions of this convention requires each party to prohibit and restrict the production and use, reduce or eliminate releases from unintentionally produced POPs, ensures that each stockpiles and waste, and to target the additional POPs. So what are these persistent organic pollutants? These are carbon-based substances, and once released in the environment, they remain intact for a long period of time. They become widely distributed throughout the environment as a result of natural processes. They also accumulate in fatty tissues of every living organisms and toxic to both humans and wildlife. If these pollutants aren't controlled, anyone who are exposed to them most likely to have cancer. Their nervous system will be damaged and reproductive organs, and also it will weaken their immune system. These are the listed chemicals that are divided into 3 annexes according to how each is produced and the level of restriction required. The Annex 1 contains a list of POPs to be eliminated. The Annex 2 are the list of POPs to be restricted. And lastly, the Annex 3 are the list of POPs produced and released as an intentional byproduct of specific processes. The following are the 12 initial POP under Stockholm Convention: aldrin, chlorodyne, DDT, toluene, endrin, iptacolor, hexachlorobenzene, Mirex, Tofaxine, and other persistent organic pollutants. The UNFCCC is the international environmental treaty negotiated between February 1991 to May 1992. It was opened for signature in Rio Earth Summit in 1992 and entered into force on May 21, 1994. 90 days after the state instrument of ratification has been deposited, as of March 2019, the UNFCCC has over 197 countries. According to the Article 2, the Convention's ultimate objective is to achieve in accordance with the relevant provisions of the Convention: stabilize greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous consequences. To prevent the food production and not affected by the climate change, and lastly, to ensure sustainable economic development. The UNFCCC role is to provide a framework for negotiating specific international treaties called the Protocol that aim to set binding limits on the greenhouse gases. The principle of the convention are the principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. The first principle states that shall cooperate in a spirit of global partnership to conserve, protect, and restore the health and integrity of the Earth ecosystem. This calls for priority of the special situation and needs of the developing countries. In order to protect the environment, the precautionary approach shall be widely applied by the states according to their capabilities. The right to develop must be fulfilled. The state should cooperate to promote a supportive and open international economic system. The obligation and commitment under the convention. First is that examine the parties' commitments in the light of the convention's objective, use specific findings and experience gained in implementing climate change policies. Second, promote and facilitate the exchange of information measures adopted by parties to address climate change and its effects. Third, facilitate the coordination of measures adopted by the parties to address climate change and its effects, if requested to do so by two or more parties. Promote and guide the development and the refinement of comparable methodologies for activities related to the implementing of the convention, such as preparing inventories for the GHG emissions or the greenhouse gases emissions and removal, and evaluating the effectiveness of measures to limit emissions and enhance removal. Fifth is assess the implementation of the convention by parties, the effects of the measures taken by them, and the progress made towards achieving the ultimate objective of the convention. Consider and adopt reports on the implementation of the convention and ensure their publication. Make the recommendations on any matters necessary for the implementation of the convention. Next is that seek to mobilize financial resources. Next, review reports submitted by its SPs and provide guidance to them. And lastly, exercise such other functions as are required to achieve the objective of the convention, as well as all the other functions assigned to the COP under the convention. The Kyoto Protocol. This protocol is an international treaty which extends to the 1992 UNFCCC. It was adopted in Kyoto, Japan on December 11, 1997 and entered into force on February 16, 2005. Currently, there are 192 parties in this protocol. The Kyoto Protocol's objective is that to reduce the greenhouse gases emission based on the premise that global warming exists and the man-made carbon dioxide emissions have caused it. Its goal is to fight global warming by reducing the greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere to a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. The Kyoto has three mechanisms: the Clean Development Mechanism, the Joint Implementation, and lastly, the Emission Trading. The Clean Development Mechanism became operational in 2006. It is sponsoring the emissions reduction projects in development countries. The Clean Development projects includes the rural electrification projects. The second one is the joint implementation. Joint projects annex B country. These units earned can be used to achieve the targets. The last one is the emission trading. The parties with emission reduction responsibilities to sell their unused units of emission reduction, which is known as the carbon trading. The Montreal Protocol. So what is the Montreal Protocol? It is an international agreement adopted on September 15, 1987. It has entered into force in January 1989, and as of August 2008, it has been ratified by 193 countries. It is also the first treaty to achieve the universal ratification by all countries. The Montreal Protocol has the objective to regulate the production and consumption of about 100 man-made ozone-depleting substances. There are 6 amendments to the Montreal Protocol brought forward the phase-out schedule and added new substances to the list of substances controlled under this protocol. The amendments are Montreal Amendment, Kigali Amendment, Copenhagen Amendment, London, Vienna, and Beijing Amendment. These are the Montreal Protocol control measures, which some substances are phased out by these developing countries, just like the chlorofluorocarbons are also known as the CFC, which has been phased out as of 1995. These are the summary of the Montreal Protocol's control measures, such as the substance chlorofluorocarbons, which has already been phased out by the developed countries in 1995, while in developing countries they are already phased out in 2010. The Multilateral Fund was established in 1991 under Article 10 of the Montreal Protocol. Its objective is to provide the financial and technical assistance to the developing countries for the phase-out of the use of ODS. This fund has provided more than $3.7 billion in financial assistance. The following table is the impact of control measures on the levels of ODS. As you can see, if this protocol wasn't being implemented, the number of these substances will gradually increase over time. While with Montreal Protocol, the level of its concentration will be low. The last protocol or the agreement is the Agenda 21. The Agenda 21 was adopted in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Currently, more than 178 governments at the United Nations Conference on the Environment and Development. Agenda 21's global implementation process is occurring, but it is slower than anticipated. Efforts to integrate environment and develop into a common sustainable development framework remain in an early stage. Meanwhile, environmental degradation and poverty at a global scale is worsening. The national government implementation has more than 85 countries have developed national strategies at present. The common strategies that these countries had are the thematic policies that articulate broad sustainable development objectives. Second is the traditional master plans based on national planning cycles. Lastly, mechanisms for coordination with donors. Sustainable development principles have been introduced in existing national frameworks in several developing countries. In the local government implementation, Local Agenda 21 or LA 21 was defined as a participatory multi-stakeholder process to achieve the goals of Agenda 21 at the local level. 6,500 local governments in more than 100 countries were involved in LA 21. By the end of 2001, 44% had active programs and 56% had committed in the process. Based on surveys conducted in 1997 and 2001, LA 21 activities more than tripled and the number of countries participating in the agenda nearly doubled in 4 years. Private sector implementation. Companies dominate the transformation of natural resources into products and services. Increasingly, they find it in their own interest to meet sustainable development goals. Private sector response includes technological innovations, implementation of eco-efficiency standards, adoption of social responsibility practices, adjustment of management approaches, and promotions of dialogue in partnerships. There are four global challenges that are faced in Agenda 21. First off, a fragmented approach towards sustainable development as decouples environment and development. Second, a lack of integrated national policies and approaches in the area of finance, trade, investment, technology, sustainable development. The third is continuing unsustainable patterns of consumption and production that imperils natural life support system. Lastly, inadequate financial resources and technology transfer from developed countries. Thank you.